They measured 3.6 on the Richter scale. I don't know, Godfrey, you experienced it? You experienced it?
No.
You didn't?
No.
Caleb, did you?
I didn't. In fact, my neighbors called to find out if I had experienced the earth tremor. It had occurred within my neighborhood, but I didn't feel it, though I was outside. That was weird because anytime the earth tremor occurs, I don't feel it. I don't know if that's anything. But.
Well, I also, like I said, I didn't experience it. I heard a noise. It was my wife who came out to ask me, did you? I said, what? Said tremor. I said, really? And then, I saw a few things on social. People were saying that they experienced the tremor and all of that. So I was asking where people experienced it and how they felt. This one says, I felt it for a moment. I thought this message came. It says, I thought God was calling me. As scared as I was, I said, speak now. Your son is listening.
So residents in areas such as Bawe, Sakina, Obeye, Kaswa, Sobutum, Sapeman, English, Manfro, and La reported that they had experienced this. And then the Ghana Geological Survey Authority also put on its X page that it had cautioned of earth tremor in Awoshi, Kanda, Kaswanyanyano, and their vicinities. And then they said that their team of seismologists are actively gathering data to determine the epicenter, the magnitude, and other factors of the earth tremor. So this was a 2.8 on the Richter scale.
Well,
right?
the Citi newsroom story, this is a 3.6. And the story did have an update from the GSSA saying that the epicenter was 7 kilometers off Wager. So that's a
to the east, west.
It didn't quite say, but it said it was 7 meters off. But just broadly, that's that area.
Yeah.
And we do know that area, I think, sits on an earthquake fault. That place is known.
It sits on a fault.
It's known.
That's
residents of those parts of Accra.
One of the people who spoke during the interview was worried that if it gets bigger, if it's a full-blown earthquake, wondering whether we're prepared enough for such incidences. Already, we see that even with the little rains, showers we experience every now and again, Kaswa, residents of Kaswa or commuters who ply the Accra Cape Coast highway, bear the brunt of the mudslide. And that's a gradual disaster that's waiting to happen. You see a lot of people building on cliffs along that enclave, and we have chipped off a major part of that cliff for a road construction that has happened in the past. We've not treated that scientifically, even though there were solutions that could have been done to plant some lawns, plant some trees along those areas. That has not been done. So you have a very sharp cliff. The soil is loosened all the time. Anytime it rains, there is mudslide. We see that, and it impacts the movement of commuters all the time. More people are building. If you go to Ogbojo, that enclave, you're looking at Wager. People are actually chipping off the mountain. Some are harvesting the soil to do other things. And literally, you would find homes sitting on the edge of cliffs in this enclave. And that's an interesting thing, that where the GSSA says was an epicenter is happening around the area where we are fast losing our vegetative cover. We are experiencing, mudslide here and there. So you can imagine if things scale up to an earthquake level, it would look a bit nasty. But then again, if you are thinking about our preparedness for disaster, you know that we've been poor in that respect. In terms of enforcement, which the seismologists spoke about in the report, if you look around our city and our built environment, you clearly tell that we are not able to enforce our local bylaws. We have done several reports of properties coming up on roads. Drains are not being, constructed while roads are built. So when surface water is moving, is running into people's homes. We've seen a flood disaster in the last couple of months. We've seen how the government has approached that disaster. So it tells you that if we sit and look on, if our municipal and local authorities sit and look on while people continue to build on roads, on waterways, and our developments continue to be haphazard and as checkered as we are seeing it, things are not going to be any better. If you drive to Awoshi, you take the bend towards, there are some places to the left, I've forgotten the names, but before you get to mine here, there's this Port Hill on the right.
Yeah.
Anytime you fly the drone, you look at our communities, you can tell the landscape is breathtaking. You have highlands that are beautiful, but people are just building anywhere. And it's you know that highlands they come with lowlands. So if there's a highland on the left, you find water bodies running through the low ends. Any depression there is there's a swampy area.
Yeah.
So in our swampy areas, we are filling them with laterite and building filling stations and homes and shops and complexes without building in a sustainable manner. That's in the low-lying areas where you have wetlands and water can rush in and hold on until it's gradually drains into, streams or eventually into the sea. When you look at that side, we are blocking that end. And then when you go uphill, we are clearing the vegetative cover. I went towards Ebri over the weekend, and real estate developers and private developers are really chipping off the vegetative cover with time and with a lot of speed. We've had this conversation again and again, and these high areas have been demarcated. These should have been green belts. They were green belts over the years. Eventually, we have managed to reclassify or rezone these, and people are building there. It looks like we don't have any control over our green belt. We are clearing that, and the clearing of that, every now and again, you see that people who commute on the Ebri stretch will tell you that there's some rockfall happening there.
Yeah.
There's always some rockfall happening there anytime it rains massively. So that is also an impending or a looming danger that we are looking on, sitting comfortably and pretending we are not seeing what is going on. So on the highlands, we are clearing the vegetation, we are clearing the trees, we are clearing the earth plants, the animals. We are losing all of that. We are replacing them with massive structures full of concrete. And even in the homes of most of these people, they are tiling that place. So there is no percolation when it rains. A lot of surface water running onto our roads and causing a lot of havoc. So really, it doesn't look like this is rock science. It's not any difficult scientific thing for anyone to say that, we didn't know, we didn't predict this. We have the academics, we have the researchers. They've always warned us, and journalists have done several reports on how we keep piling on a lot of pressure on our landscape without doing so in a very sustainable manner. So should the earth tremor move to another level, should the scale move towards 4 or 5 thereabout, we all should know that we are up for some disaster coming, and it doesn't look like we have even armed ourselves with what to do when there is an earth tremor.
Look,
I don't know, Nathan. Do you know what to do when there's an earth tremor?
I don't know.
What would you do immediately?
I run under a table. They'll tell you that hide under a table.
Yes.
All of that. But I get your point. We really need to have a conversation around the hard things in terms of looking at this city and figuring out how sustainable it is and making it more resilient. And then there's the lower level things about safety, what to do, those kinds of things. And somebody in the report was talking about sharing information on social. That's wonderful. But I feel that we need to even go down to the schools, drills, fire drill, earthquake drill. Because when problems happen, I say that the problem may be big, but the bigger challenge comes from the fact that how we even react as individuals. If something happens, we are all in a haste to rush out of a place. And panic mode. It has its own attendant problems and things. So we need to do 2 things. One, get the authorities to figure out what to do about this city and employ the bylaws properly so people stop building haphazardly. And you make a good point, Caleb, about when you see the landscape of places. at face value, it looks really nice until
Nice.
maybe you look at it area and you realize that, hey,
No,
people are
I
just
mean, if
doing-
you look at it from the aerial level, then it looks
That's
a bit
better, isn't it, when
sometimes.
you
You
look at
see,
it
I mean, you go to other places and in the heart of town, busier than ours, with a higher population than ours, the space is organized, the roads are cut out, the drains are covered, there are parks in the heart of the city. And you see the quality of air you breathe there is different. You come back home and in the heart of the city, everything is a mess. Everywhere you drive, I mean, look, if there is any neighborhood you've not visited in the last 3 weeks, chances are if you drove back there, the trees along that stretch is gone. You see,
trees have been cut.
and we are not replacing them. And you talk about those trees that we've been planting, that has become an annual ritual. Every June, we spend so much money planting trees. What becomes of them? We do not know. But the trees that have been there for 30, 50 years, before you know, someone just picks a sawmill and then they fell it. So I really don't know how our local authorities are working, but eventually the I would say negligence and checking of responsibility, all of that will come back to haunt us. So people must be up and doing.
Okay.
You know, understand? People must really be up and doing, because it's not making sense. You go to Damfa, a very swampy area. I mean, so much of the area you find that, oh, this area, you can see reefs here. Tells you that this is a wetland of sorts, but people are filling it with laterite and they are building massive buildings. Eventually, you will find that the buildings will be sinking. There's a place called Ashbread around this, Wager SCC area close to the Wager Dam. If you go there, the last time the Wager Dam was spilled, we also saw how even Tetegu was flooded. And it was at such scale that the residents said they had never seen that before. All right. So Tetegu got flooded because the Wager Dam had to be saved. We had to spill some water.
Yeah.
We have seen what has happened at the Akosombo, Lower Volta area. And everyone has seen just how abysmal the state has been in terms of responding to the disaster. It has been really abysmal. But it is the same state that is looking on, sitting down for people to be building on waterways. People are building in swampy areas. People are clearing vegetations on highlands. So everything is happening without any discipline. Everything is happening without any order. And it doesn't make sense. Essentially, let me give you just a picturesque view of how our urban planning and spatial layout looks like. It's like an articulator has driven over an eggshell and it's all cracked and it's a mess. That's how Accra looks like. That's how the city is. It's not livable. It doesn't work. And you see, we were in London a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things I saw that I was really jealous about was how the aged and persons with mobility challenge could move themselves about independently. You're in their wheelchairs, it's electronic, and you can move from one point to the other, enter a bus, enter a train, all by yourself. And you find young mothers, young couples wheeling their little babies around parks and all. Try that in Kaneshie and see something. Before you move from your house to a school, what from the road is no good. There are no pedestrian walkways. There are no drains. If there are drains, they are open. Everything is bazaar, and it all comes together, and it will be a beautiful cocktail of disaster. Should the worst happen, that's why our municipal engineers must make their presence felt in their various localities. So if you're in Ga East and people are clearing the vegetation on the hills, you don't just look on. I understand there are challenges they may be having here and there in terms of resources and all of that. But many of the MCEs too, we need them, we need the state to give us MCEs who know how to plan cities, who are knowledgeable about spatial planning. We need to have people who can run cities and local municipalities in an efficient manner, because if you are an appointing authority and you drive around the city and it's not functioning, you should know. And someone must be asked questions. There must be key, what they call it, indicators.
Indicators, yeah.
Performance indicators. So that if you get to Medina is not working, someone must be answering questions. You go to some communities, people are always burning, and there is no implication for that. People are always burning. Something is always burning, and you wonder what is happening. There's a lot of conversation. We've attended a lot of conferences,
Yeah.
COP23, COP25, COP15, COP10, COP12. We've been to all the COPs. But our spatial planning, our urban spaces, our rural spaces, they don't look like there's any COP around.
Let me look. Talking about, there's a document called the Accra Resilience Strategy.
Yes.
Okay, the Accra Resilience Strategy. Now, let me just tell you the 5 dangers Accra faces. Okay, now the 5 priority shocks that Accra has to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay, now they define shocks as sudden sharp events that threaten a city. So they just happen, really. But for Accra, we are dealing with 5 things.
Yes.
1 is flooding.
Floods are big.
Okay. 2 is fire. We don't talk a lot about fire outbreaks, but when the Ghana National Fire Service releases data on fire outbreaks in 6-month chunks or in yearly chunks, Godfrey, some of the numbers will strike you. 3,000 fires in a year. 3,000 fires all over. The third thing that's one of Accra's priority shocks, disease outbreak. And Accra is gradually becoming a place where, should an outbreak of a heavy disease hit, will really suffer. Look, drive round at night when the markets close around 7, 8 p.m. The refuse is
and the scent, the
smell,
odor that comes from our marketplaces where people go to sell food stuff for us to eat. We are not living in our environment. There's no sense of dignity.
Yeah.
From the public toilet to the market, there's no difference.
So all this waste, we are not recycling. We are struggling to manage waste. We have aboboyas running all around under the pretext of they are carrying waste. And as they go around, the waste is falling off their vehicles.
Yeah.
So the highways are littered. The 4th shock Accra has to prioritize: infrastructure and building collapses. A few weeks ago, something happened. Where was it? Was it Dome? I think it was. A building collapsed. We've had a few of those things happening. Yeah. And as a city, we need to think about it critically. We have engineers. We have architects. They are municipal engineers and architects, the people who issue the permits. How come buildings are still collapsing? Is it that they just issue blanket permits? Is it that they are not sure of what they are doing? Is it that they give the permits and the wrong people build? I don't know. The final one, earthquakes. So like we saw over the weekend, the tremor around Waja McCarthy Hill. Sorry. We've had a few of those. Between 2020 and 2023, we've had a few tremors. And it's important that we start to think critically about that as a city. How resilient is Accra? Do we have what it takes to handle a disaster should it happen? Emergency systems, how are they? Even the roads. And you see, whenever we talk about some of these, we need to understand that they are all linked. Because if the roads are in poor shape, no ambulance can come to you. It doesn't matter how specced up that ambulance is. It cannot come to you if the road is bad. No ambulance will get to you if you are cut off by a flood, meaning that you haven't laid out your place well enough that if heavy rains occur, you are cut off. Once you are cut off, no ambulance is coming to you.
That's
You're going
true.
to die. So think about the fact that we'll have an earthquake which could potentially damage roads or split roads into halves, and then your ambulance can't get across. So as a city, we really, really, really need to think critically about this space that we are running and whether it can deal with a shock when it happens. Because we are looking at dangers, and the dangers are growing by the day. You're talking about the waste and rubbish, Charlie. It's and every day it gets more serious. Every day it gets more serious. I don't know. We'll see if we can speak to I don't know. Maybe you can find an MC. Maybe you can see if you can speak to an MC from the Wejagbawe side and ask them really what the plan is. Because that side has all kinds of things. When it rains, there's a problem there. They have tremors to deal with.
Yeah.
And then they have the yearly ritual of the dam spillage. So maybe we can speak to who's the MC? Godfrey, is that not Patrick Kumo? I think
Yes,
that's Patrick
it
Kumo.
is.
We'll see if we can speak to him.
You
I don't
know,
if my
the
producers can get
interesting
him.
history about McCarthy Hills, for example, is that due to the rumors, I mean, and the information around that it's an earthquake-prone area, not many people love to put up their property over there. So for those who did back in the day, they bought huge lands and they built massive mansions. So if you go to McCarthy, you'd find you could drive for about 10 minutes around someone's wall. You think it's a government school. It's a very huge place, you know. and people have put up very massive buildings there because then ordinarily a lot of people are trying to stay away from what they figure is trouble on the McCarthy Hill. But otherwise, if you go elsewhere, if you have such hilly areas that are green, it's such a beautiful place to be, especially if you have your roads done properly, things are well cut out and the demarcations are properly done. If you move down, you'd find that a lot of people are building. Plus, it's scenic. The views at night is something else. You would love it. So essentially, our development must have a semblance of sense around it. There must be a semblance of thoughts that we have given some detailed thoughts to this. Where are our schools located? Where are our churches located? Where are markets built? Where are landfill site based? How are we planning our development such that you don't have refuse behind someone's house? You don't have, all kinds of things. It's a mix of everything. And sometimes you really, really can't help but wonder what the impact, I don't want to say what the use, but what the impact of the land use and spatial planning LOSPA has been in our societies. Because if you look around, it doesn't look like there's any spatial plan. If you take away some of our major universities, like the University of Ghana, you go to GIMPA, you go to UPSA, you go to Ashesi, you go to UCC. Even UCC, they are struggling with encroachment and all of that. But if you go to University of Ghana, you can tell this is how a proper space should be. But you come to La Paz, Abeka, or Dolna, it's deteriorating. It doesn't look good.
Okay.
Godfrey, yes.
Let me just put in my 2 cents. You see, my biggest concern over the weekend when this thing happened, as I came online, was how there was actually a general belief that the state has no role to play in the prevention of, how would you say, not a disaster, but in making sure that things do not get much worse than they will if such a situation happens. Nobody has said the state should stop an earthquake. It is not possible.
No, as for that one.
You cannot predict an earthquake, but you can forecast an earthquake. There's a difference. You cannot predict, but they can forecast over a period of time based on the expertise of the people at the Ghana Geological Survey. So there's a role to play. Now, part of the role feeds into the conversation, Caleb, and you are having about metropolitan authorities, about city authorities. The fault lines are known. Everybody knows about the Krapium fault lines. Everybody knows about the coastal fault lines. So we know that if anything is to happen, like we saw in Ghana in 1939, where 16 people died, millions of pounds worth of houses and goods were destroyed. You bring that, we ask ourselves the same question. The same places that were destroyed in 1939, if we were to have an earthquake in this year, is it the same number of people who lived there as we lived there in 1939? The same number of houses that were there. So the likelihood of increasing the damage is high. Okay, so what do we do to prevent those things happening when it does happen? Because if it does, the thing is, if it does happen, what do we want to do? And you make a fine point. You do want an ambulance to be able to reach there. There has to be a plan in place for if this happens, the ambulance should be able to pass here, or we have to be able to do this and this. But even better, we have allowed those places to become high settlement areas, some of these major fault lines. So if the forecasting had been done, or I'm sure it has been done, because there's a lot of material on what can happen. So we know where these areas are. City authorities should not have allowed those kinds of places to be as heavily populated as they are now. In fact, we keep hearing city authorities talk about nobody should stay on the Kaswa, that thing, the hill there.
Yeah.
The one with the mudslide about to happen.
Mansions on top of it.
Yes, but there are $1 million properties at the top of that thing. You understand? What are the building regulations that are in place for buildings that are situated in areas that are close to the fault line? Because you cannot build the same way you will build in maybe a part of the country that is not along that fault line as compared to how you are supposed to build when you live at McCarthy Hill. So who ensures that all the houses that are put up, if you cannot put up this kind of building in this kind of area, well, sorry, you can't live here. So for instance, I'll give you a typical example. Japan is prone to...
Japan sits on very active earthquake.
You cannot put up a house in Japan if it does not meet the code. Because they know that the earthquake will come. The best way to protect you is to put in place a law that says that if you are building the house, the concrete must be this thick, something must be this size, so that when it does happen to you, your chances of survival are high. They are not saying you will not die, but they are saying that the rules are in place to increase your chances of survival. Are those things in place for the people who live in that part of town? So if you live in McCarthy Hill, you live in Bawi, you live in all the places that have been listed, how do you build your houses? Have the municipal authorities ensured that people build in a certain way? If your house is not built that way, we are sorry, leave.
Ublogo.
You understand? Other than that, what you are going to have is, when that moment comes, you are going to have a lot more to deal with than you would normally have to deal with if you had simply put in place measures based on the predictions, which is my concern. So for those of us who ask ourselves, what can the state do? That is what the state can do.
Yeah.
Okay? Apart from the education, look, the Ghana Geological they do a lot of education. They do a lot of education on this thing. But outside of the education that they do, then the state also comes in and says, or the municipal authorities come in and says, well, we are aware that based on the predictions or the forecasts of the GGSS, we are in this space. The only way you can come and live here is to have this kind of building here. If you cannot, move. The people who live on that hill, they've been threatening to move them for God knows how long. But here's the situation. Somebody owns a $3.2 million house at the top of that hill. Who are you to go and tell that person to leave? You sat down and watched the person build a $3.2 million house at the top of the hill, which is gradually being eroded every time it rains. One of these days, we all know that house will come down. We are just waiting for it to come down. And authorities will move there with their pickups and things and say, oh, it did not need to happen.
Eventually, the lawyers will tell us that we cannot just demolish structures, after we've looked at.
All right, let's go to a few of the messages that have come through on 0549986996. 850, still listening to the Citi Breakfast Show. We're just having a conversation, really, about earth tremors and how resilient Accra is. There are so many things. Like I said, if you go through the Accra resilience strategy, there are 5 things Accra needs to prioritize: floods, fires, disease outbreaks, infrastructure building collapses, and earthquakes. All right, Caleb, please help us with some messages.
Good morning, Nathan. Caleb has touched on one of my biggest problems in Accra: indiscriminate burning of refuse. Sometimes as late as 11 p.m., people will be burning their rubbish. You virtually have to close your windows and can barely sleep. The indiscipline is too much, all because of lack of enforcement of anything. This is coming from Eric. He didn't add his location.
All right, one more message.
Yes. Good morning, Nathan and Caleb. We are in a country that, if you think about it, you wonder what really the problem of Ghana is. But for me, the serious one is what Caleb touched on: our markets. I drive past markets like Malam, Makola, Agbogloshi, etc., and the place smells.
And they are the places that smell the worst, I think.
Right.
The most.
The place where food commodities are sold for us to cook and eat. Oh my God. God save us. This is David from Ofanko.
More of the messages are welcome on 0549986996. Now, there's good news this Christmas. If you want to go to the UK or France, Chelsea International Travel and Tour is there for you. They have